Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the second day of the Martens Center sideline event here live from Rotterdam, Ahoy Arena at the EPP 27th Congress. I would like to invite all of you who are interested in our next panel to take a seat. Otherwise, if you're watching us online, make sure to join the debate by using the hashtag United for Europe. You can join the debate live on our YouTube channel and on our Martens Center website, martencenter.eu. We will start our day by discussing, rather again, very prominent and relevant topic among the EU policymakers and wider audience, namely on migration. But without further delay, I'd like to give the floor to Novotný, the Martens Center Senior Research Officer, who will moderate today's first discussion, Future Prospects for EU Migration and Refugee Policy. Vit, over to you.
Welcome to today's first short panel, which is entitled Refugees and Migrants, What's Next for the European Union? Let me introduce our two panelists. Rasa Juknevičienė, MEP, is a member of the Homeland Union, Lithuanian Christian Democrats. In the European Parliament, she serves as Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Security and Defense. Tasos Chatzivasileiou, MP, is a member of New Democracy, the EPP's Greek member party. In the Hellenic Parliament, he serves as Secretary of the Standing Committee of National Defense and Foreign Affairs. The starting point of our discussion is the influx of war refugees from Ukraine that has begun in February. My first question is as follows. Because of millions of people fleeing the war, the EU is experiencing probably the most intensive immigration flow in its history. How would you assess the EU's response so far? We'll start with Rasa Juknevičienė, please.
Thank you for invitation. First of all, I have to say that I am not the best expert on migration, because my country, before I became member of European Parliament, was not very much in the focus of migration. Maybe more we Lithuanians were emigrating. Many people were emigrating since 19th century, I think, because of economical, political reasons. After the World War II, many people in 1944 left our statehood when it was occupied second time by Soviet Union, and people were afraid of exactly the same atrocities we see now in Ukraine, because Soviet Red Army, they were doing exactly the same, raping, killing, destroying, imprisoning, deporting people. So this is our experience and my as a politician from Lithuania. But when I became member of European Parliament in 2019, my committee, not only SEDE, but also DEVE, Development Committee in the Parliament, European Parliament, we are facing, it's our responsibility, to deal with the migration, be it Greece, be it Africa, be it other countries. It's a challenge for European Union security, migration as such. But now, coming back to your question on current situation, I think that the EU response was really quite effective and very swift and on time, because immediately it was activated temporary protection directive. Member states willingly accept refugees and respond to the needs of the member states of the first entry. Everybody know Polish experience, Slovakia experience, other countries, Romania, other bordering countries, including tiny Moldova, where they have, society with smallest incomes in European continent. So acceptance from the society side was very good, but EU response also was very positive. And to respond to the sudden large-scale displacement from Ukraine, I already mentioned the directive was activated. It was activated first time, and it happened on 4th of March, just few weeks after the war, this large-scale war started. And rights under the Temporary Protection Directive include a residence permit, access to the labor market and housing, medical assistance, and access to education for children. Temporary protection will last for at least 1 year, and it may be extended depending to the situation in Ukraine. I would like to add, not taking much time, that myself I can follow how it works very directly because I have family in my house at home in Lithuania. My parents' flat, we invited 2 women with children, and they live there, so I can follow how it works, how people are doing, how they can access for them to what Lithuania is doing and what European level support is, including that we have 2 boys, teenagers, child, they have access to the school, and they got it immediately. Next week, when they got this housing in our flat, immediately they went to the school, by the way, where I graduated many years ago.
That's nice, thank you. Tasos, how does it look from Greece?
First of all, I'm coming from a country that knows a lot about migration. You know that Greece is in the forefront of the external borders of the European Union. Therefore, we have received thousands of refugees and migrants during the last 10 or 15 or more years. And we have a huge experience in this field. Of course, we all admit that the Russian invasion against Ukraine has caused a humanitarian crisis, a huge tragedy against those people. Millions of Ukrainians have been displaced. And allow me to tell you that 90% of them are women and children. So this is why Europe took the historical decision of the 4th of March, as our dear friend said before, about granting a temporary protection status to the Ukrainian refugees, so they can benefit from same rights everywhere across Europe. And allow me to tell you that as a Greek politician, I'm really satisfied and happy because I saw a huge mobilization across European countries vis-à-vis health, vis-à-vis education and jobs for those Ukrainian people that are in need. This is a very difficult task. We have to admit that. But it's very good that we had a unified reaction. I can tell you that we have an unprecedented coordination, unlike previous crises, like the one with the Syrian war in 2015, where, allow me to remind to you that Greece was all alone for more than 3 or 4 years. Our European friends reacted in a very late way. So I'm very happy that the Ukrainian crisis obliged, in quotation marks, Europe to react quickly and promptly. And we are really proud of that. It's very important to see we have the solidarity across Europe. And it's very important to see that even the European Parliament is voting for funds to all the countries that give shelter to Ukrainians. And of course, for direct funding to Ukraine itself. This is a very positive step, and allow me to give you congratulations to the European Parliament because you do an excellent work on that. But to my opinion, we have to discuss for a medium-term structural plan for inclusion. This is the reality. We have a very hard reality in Europe with the Ukrainian crisis. Therefore, we have to be ready to react and to give a better response.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Somewhat to follow up from that response that you just gave, Tasos, Some critics keep saying that now, with regard to refugees from Ukraine, the response at the EU level as well as at the national level is discriminatory. And this concerns both the current flow, because there are not only Ukrainian citizens fleeing Ukraine, but also citizens of other countries trying to get into the European Union, but also with regard to the previous crisis, the Syrian crisis and so on. How would you respond to that criticism?
Look, we have to be honest, and we have to admit that we apply double standards in Europe in many cases. I mean, between the Ukrainian refugees and migrants and between the rest of the refugees that arrive in the European territory. Yes, the Ukrainians with the temporary protection status, they have the right to move freely in the European Union, while the others need a resident status that is being granted after 5 years in a European country. And Greece has pointed out this duality. Our Minister for Migration, Mr. Mitarakis, has already described that in many European fora, in many cases. Yes, Ukrainians, they are our brothers and sisters. Yes, the war in Ukraine is inside our house, is inside our neighborhood. And yes, we have to help our friends in Ukraine to stand up. And we have to give shelter to them, we have to protect them by all means. But there are not genuine and not genuine refugees in Europe. Ethnic or cultural profiling is not a choice and should not be the choice for modern European countries like the ones we live in. And allow me to remember some stories from Greece 8 or 10 years ago when we had a tremendous migratory flow from the Syrian war. And many friends, many European partners, especially from the northern or the eastern part of Europe, were asking from the Greek state to send them refugees that are doctors, nurses, technicians, engineers, etc. As if they were asking to send them tall, blonde guys or ladies with blue eyes. That's true, yes, that's the truth. We have to admit that. So this is not solidarity, dear friends. This is profiling. And we have to condemn such an idea. And I'm happy because now we are really honest and we see the reality as it is. At the same time, allow me to add that we have to condemn every effort in Europe, every effort of instrumentalization of those desperate people. We saw that in Turkey. Turkey did that against Greece several times. You remember the story in March 2020, 2 years ago, in the Greek-Turkish border when Turkey had sent thousands of illegal migrants to pass inside the Greek territory. We saw that with Belarus, with Lukashenko regime, against the Eastern European countries. So we have to send a clear message to all those regimes that Europe is not accepting and shows zero tolerance to such a stance. And I feel that sometimes we do not send the clear message we should do. So let us work together in order to send this clear message that we are not accepting such a behavior from anybody in Europe.
Yeah. Rasa, how do you respond to that criticism?
Very good question. Because we can hear, of course, in the air such question, and it's a very good possibility to talk about that. You already mentioned, I will not try to repeat, but I just want to add that temporary protection directive also offers protection to non-Ukrainian citizens. It's not exactly only for Ukrainians what we adopted in EU, but for all citizens who are ineligible to return to their country of origin. And now I would like to spend a few minutes elaborating a little bit more on this weaponization of migration, which was the case in my country, Poland, last summer. It was like attack against us. It was like a special operation. And today, when I see the war started, large-scale war started 24th of February, when I am looking backwards, what's going on at that time, it was like a preparation for the war, because Putin started this war not just before yesterday, decided to act and he started this war. No, it was preparation, it was hybrid warfare before he launched this military attack. And we, like countries like Poland, Lithuania, other countries, we, as you know, we are most vocal countries criticizing Putin regime in EU before that. And of course, we now see that it was a huge mistake. Some EU countries were doing for decades, collaborating with Putin regime, and what we have now with energy dependence and so on and so. So it was Lukashenko was an instrument together with Putin to organize such attack, hybrid warfare attack, using people especially from Iraq and other countries as weapons to push them to cross the border. And you know, I can now express what I hear from people they vote for me, or people from my constituency, and they distinguish very well who is who. The Ukrainian people are fleeing the war, real war today, fleeing by legal routes. They are not coming via forests. They are not. They do not break through illegal places. They are not accompanied by Belarusian KGB or other structures, as we have evidences. They are not just accidentally finding the route to come to Lithuania or Poland, not legally, not via, not normally asking to accept them. But they are accompanied. They do not arrive as Belarusian tourists, I mean Ukrainians. They are not tourists from Belarus, as it happened last summer. People in my country do not accept lies and deception. So this is why every government have to protect it's our national security issue, not to allow dictators like Lukashenko and Putin to use this weapon against our countries. So this is a fundamental difference. People, of course, they are not maybe innocent, but also after all, those who buy tourist trips and visas to Minsk know what they are doing. They are paying a lot, not because they are fleeing the war, but for other reasons. Of course, there are serious reasons. They want to live, to have better life, but on the other hand, it is people don't accept in my country this illegal routes via forests to come when they have very legal possibility to ask for asylum to Lithuania or any other country.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's an interesting insight. You wanted to comment, Tasos?
Yes. She's absolutely right. It's true that both Lukashenko and Putin have tried to destabilize your countries by using migratory flows against you. And allow me to tell you that the same happened against Greece by Erdogan, by Turkey. Do you know that there is an unofficial Muslim Schengen zone? I mean, you can pay 100 euros to buy a flight ticket from North Africa or Asia to fly to Istanbul, 80 euros, 90 euros, 100 euros maximum, without visa, because you're coming from a Muslim state. And then from Istanbul, you can come to the Greek forest. I mean, you can pass through to Greece from an illegal route just during a night, just in a couple of hours. This is what Turkey does in the southern borders. This is the same problem that applies to your countries. This is why we strongly insist that we have to condemn these practices and to show a unity, to show unity against those regimes that try to destabilize our very own societies.
I would like to add, it is not only the past that you had before, we had last year, but we have to be not only condemned, but also to be ready, to be prepared, because what we will have maybe next month, when we see blockade of Odessa port, when we see this shortage of, possible shortage of food. So I am following Putin propaganda as much as I can, because I can speak and understand Russian. We, during occupation, Lithuanian occupation, we were forced to learn Russian language, but I always say that it's the only good thing I got from occupation, Russian language, because now I can follow directly what they are saying. And what they are saying now, they are threatening European Union, blackmailing with the flood of refugees. They will come from North Africa and other countries because of Ukrainians, because that Ukrainians are not surrendering, they don't say so, they don't surrender, and they don't give up fighting for their freedom. And this is blackmail for European Union, and other countries are saying that you will get more refugees. And they can organize this because they already had experience against Poland, against Lithuania last year. So they are ready with their structures there, those illegal groups. They are, you know, organized crime to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just a follow-up question. Have you picked up any explicit intent from the Kremlin regime that the starving of North Africa is
yes, every day.
Was it said openly as such?
Every day they are blackmailing. Blockade is done by Russian Federation, you know, situation in the Black Sea, and they are blackmailing. This propaganda is too soft to say. Their weapon of mass brain destruction they are using, or mind destruction, they are using as weapon their TV channels for their own people, but not only. In our countries, they every day are blackmailing that European Union will suffer very soon, autumn or next winter, because of flood of people. They will come because somebody are providing weapons to Ukraine, because the war will take long time, and so on and so on. So we have to have this in mind. We have to be ready for that, and of course not to give up. Help Ukraine, otherwise we will lose, and we will have more and more problems in the future with such regimes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Last question. Tasos, we have close to 7 million people from Ukraine. Probably in a couple of days we'll reach that number. How do we go about integration with so many people? Of course, impact on the member states is different. The eastern countries are much more exposed. Should we talk about integration at all? Because those people, they keep saying, most of them, not everybody, that they want to go back. They are not here to settle. So how do you see this question?
Of course, integration of Ukrainians is a big challenge for the European Union. And we have to find ways to integrate those people. But first of all, we have to see how many of them would like to stay in Europe, because we listen from them that they would like to return to their homeland as soon as the war is over. And we have to help them in rebuilding their country. This is our first and main goal. We have to help Ukraine to stand up by her own legs, on her own legs. So this is our first priority. But we have to accelerate the integration of those that are going to stay in the European Union. And this is not an obligation. This is a matter of principle for us, for Europeans. But allow me to tell you that we have three observations. We have three observations on that. First of all, we have to find affordable housing for those people. This is their first problem we have to address. The second problem is to have an educational catch-up. We have thousands of children that need to continue their educational programs. And this is a very important step we have to make all together. And the third one, our labor ministries should work together, should coordinate between them in order to ensure that all skilled workers could be quickly absorbed by the European economies. We need to help those people to find a safe job in order to feel better and to create a new life in EU member states. But of course, our priority should be to address their urgent needs now. I mean, access to health, this is very important, access to schools, as I told you before, and of course, to find quickly jobs for those that are in need. Otherwise, we are not Europeans. Since we are Europeans, we have to defend our values and to give all the adequate assistance to those people from Ukraine in Europe.
Rasa, what about integration?
Yes, I will connect your last question with previous one about the differences. And we see these differences now. Among those, they were weaponized and they were came to Lithuania and Poland not looking shelter or hub for their life, but as a transit station to move to Germany, to other countries, and they were not seeking or looking for jobs in our country. But Ukrainians, now we have in my country about 50,000, I think, something like that. They are looking for jobs immediately.
Exactly.
And we can provide them. I also give you an example from those two ladies. They live in our flat in my city. They got possibility to look for the jobs next day when they arrived. And now 3 of them are able to work, legal to work. So they have good jobs in factories in my city. They are doing well. They are happy because of that. But all of them, many of them, majority of them say that they will be back to their country as soon as possible. And already now, I have numbers here. Of course, they are changing every day. The trend of those they are going back now is growing. 33,000 of those they escaped already, they are back home, and even more every day. So one of the 19 years old daughter of the lady, she lived with us, she was back next week to Ukraine because she said that I made a mistake to go here. She little bit looked around, and of course she is young, she wants to fight in Ukraine. And she was back home immediately. But it's many examples, it is. So, but on integration, yes, we have experience already because Ukrainians, they were coming to Lithuania before this war. Many of them, thousands of them, they were looking for salaries. For example, truck drivers were very welcomed, and they were very good workers, good employees. In Lithuania. So we have experience already of them because almost all of them, they want to take part in this labor market in my country, and we welcome them because we need somehow such people. They want to do their job, and everybody, by the way, with very small exceptions, employees are. Those business and other structures are very happy of Ukrainians how they are dealing with the duties they are getting in their jobs.
Okay. Thank you. This is all we have time for. Thank you very much for this brief but interesting discussion. I will hand over back to Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you, Vit, and thank to our panelists. I invite you, if you are more interested into the topic of migration, please do check for all of the audience here in Rotterdam at Ahoy Arena. Please check our publication corner and where you can take some of our papers and publications with you. Now we will break for 30 minutes. We will meet you again at 11 o'clock, where we are going to have a special panel with the European President, with the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola. Thank you and see you at 11. and dear viewers, may I get your attention now as we are having a very special guest here in our Martens Center sideline event. She is the President of the European Parliament and a member of the Executive Board of the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies. I will now give the floor to the President of the European Parliament and our moderator, Strategic Coordinator and Senior Research Officer at the Martens Center, Federico Ottavio Reho, who are going to discuss about a European vision of democracy. Federico, you may take the floor.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for that concise and effective introduction. I also welcome Madam President on the platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are delighted to have you. Well, a European vision of democracy, we could not have hoped to discuss it with anyone better, the foremost representative of European democracy. I would like to start, the situation somehow obliges us with a question that is not a happy one. There is a democratic country in Europe that is now fighting a war of survival against an authoritarian power in our eastern neighborhood, the eastern neighborhood of the EU. Of course, I'm referring to Ukraine. And we all feel that these events have a broader and deeper significance than the merely military strategic constellation. And you have been the first leader of an EU institution to support the Ukrainians to go to Kiev. So my first question inevitably has to be, what is the meaning of the war in Ukraine for European democracy and for you as President of the European Parliament?
Well, first of all, we have been talking about one thread throughout this whole 2 days at this Congress of the European People's Party, is that there is a world that is before the 24th of February and the world that is after the 24th of February. And I would never have imagined when having been elected and being given this responsibility of presiding the European Parliament that I would have to talk about war, but that we'd also talk about a different dimension of Europe, and that all the discussions, whether it is about energy, environment, migration, defense, treaty change, would all happen against a backdrop of an invasion by an autocratic regime into, as you said, a democratic country that is fundamentally fighting for our values that we all share.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you very much. Yesterday we had a beautiful singing performance in support of Ukraine, and the singer said, Rostana, the victory of Ukraine is the victory of freedom, and I think we all agree to that.
Yes, they are fighting our war.
Indeed. Now, one of the issues that this war has brought to the fore is the fact that as long as authoritarian powers remain on the European continent, I'm referring to Russia, but also to Belarus to an extent, democracy in Europe is not completely safe. And many in the EPP have been working also with Russian civil society, trying to foster democratic development in that country. And therefore, my second question to you will be, do you see a democratic Russia that is no longer a threat to its neighbor in the future, maybe at a point in the future, joining the European community of democracies? Not the EU, of course, but a European security space that is pacified and democratic. And how can the EU contribute to that outcome?
I'll start with the last part of your question about how the EU can contribute, and that is simply by not allowing for this war to continue. There are talks of appeasement, there are talks of saving face, there are talks of calling it, let's say, an end to the war where Ukraine is not around the table. For me, that is not only unacceptable, that would be a monumental failure of the European Union, and also a moment where we have a chance to send a message that we didn't do in 2008, we didn't do in 2015, when we thought Putin would stop with Georgia, when we thought Putin would stop after the invasion of Crimea. We see that he did not stop with the razing to the ground of Mariupol and Kharkiv, and let's not kid ourselves, he will not stop. And that means that, of course, our ultimate aim needs to be that the regime is brought down and that we can truly look at the possibility of having a democratic Russia that functions in a way that we can operate in the same space. You mentioned security. I would say peace first. I would say democracy, justice, liberty for everyone, including those who do not agree with those who take the decisions, because the intimidation and the oppression of opposition activists, as we have seen with Alexei Navalny, is not anything that we would ever share. But in a situation where that would one day be possible, and it is our role to work towards that, then of course, the larger the space of peace is, the better for Europe and the world.
Thank you, Madam President. Maybe one last question on the global situation. I mean, we saw that democracy in Europe is not safe if democracy is not safe in Europe's neighborhood first, but there is a global problem in a way. Many see a new Cold War dawning on the horizon, and the defining criteria in which that divide the blocks somehow seem to be, according to many, it is revisionist authoritarian powers, such as China and Russia on the one hand, and on the other hand, Western democratic powers, the US and Europe, first and foremost, but also others, Australia, South Korea, and so on. Do you see that happening, and what will be the impact on Europe, which is traditionally very uncomfortable with confrontation and polarization and prefers, cooperation also at an international global level?
Well, first of all, I think it was high time, as we did, to revitalize our transatlantic relations. When we talk about North America, the United States, with President Biden and his administration, but also with Prime Minister Trudeau and his administration, Canada and the US are vital partners, not only economically, but also in joining us in our quest for global peace and security. And in this moment, that was never truer. We need to become more interdependent, because at the moment we are too dependent on unreliable, menacing countries that are not democratic and can blackmail us at a moment's notice. The European Parliament has been very strong on this. We need, first of all, a proper defense policy. Europe needs to no longer rely on other global powers to solve its challenges or to address or find solutions when Europe looked away. We have looked away for far too long. You mentioned the Eastern neighborhood, our countries whom neighbor Russia in the European Union, that have found not only, let's say, comfort, but military security in NATO, but also in the European Union. And as we can see also with the decision of Finland and Sweden to do precisely what Putin tried to avoid doing by invading Ukraine. So that was a gross miscalculation that we have to ensure is the costliest mistake that Putin has ever made. When we talk about the more global scenario, I think Europe needs to take the lead. I think we need to identify new alliances that can be set up, not only politically. I talk about digital innovation, green transition, economic competitiveness, technological advancement, research. We are huge in creative industries. We have dedicated so many projects and financial possibilities for them to be used in the recovery period after the pandemic. Let's focus again on making Europe a global player and a global leader, because frankly, if we don't do it, nobody else will.
Thank you very much. I think everybody in the EPP and here can share your plea for European global leadership.
I hope beyond the EPP and the whole Parliament. I can tell you the European Parliament is extremely united on this.
That's excellent. Let's get a little bit closer to home. We have looked at the external threats, let's say, to democracy, but many feel that there are also there is a sense of democratic malaise inside our Western democracies. We all remember the assault on Capitol Hill 1.5 years ago in the US, but of course closer to Europe we also have serious issues, things like populism, like identity politics, rising inequalities, technological transformations that we haven't seen in generations. So I guess my question to you is then, do you see risks also internally for the stability of European democracies, and what can the EU and particularly the European Parliament, what is maybe the EU and the European Parliament doing to address those issues?
Well, first of all, I think what has happened after the 24th of February is an emergence of a new sort of parliamentary diplomacy and democracy. President Zelensky addressed the European Parliament as the first parliament, and after which I invited 160 parliaments across the world to do what we had done, because the message that we received from President Zelensky and his colleagues that were echoed when I visited Kiev exactly 2 months ago was, let's talk to each other. Let's make sure that we understand each other. Let's make sure that elected parliamentarians across the world who are being told by their public, look, let's open up. These are Ukrainians, Europeans, Belarus, you mentioned earlier. We have countries who want to join Europe. Let's open the door for them. Different paths, different realities, but let's not close doors, because this is all what Europe is about. It's about hope. It's about giving the young generation a reason to vote. And looking forward, when we look at, yes, frustrations that exist, gaps that we talk about, we've been talking about gaps for so long, and we have a golden opportunity in 2024 for the European elections. We have 88 million 15 to 29-year-old young people who are eligible to vote for the European Parliament elections. How are we going to give them that reason to vote and be pro-European and not be ashamed to say it? Be prepared for criticism, acknowledge our mistakes, our failures, but also prove that if it were not for Europe during the pandemic, we would not have had vaccines for all, we would not have had medical care for all, we would not at the moment have the economic, unprecedented support for everybody in the European Union, and this is where democracies can be vulnerable, and we need to be vigilant. The European Parliament is extremely strong on that governments need to be held accountable, that democracy remains the most important tool that we have, but let's not underestimate how vulnerable in a world of disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, easy populist narrative can take hold of people who have nowhere else to turn to. So my take is, let's identify what is lacking, let's work on our successes, never forget, my parents have always taught me this, where you came from, and never stop to stand up for what you believe in. If we can present this, and I am proud to be part of a political family that has always stood for this, then I'm convinced we can win against anyone trying to destroy the project.
Thank you, Madam President, also for mentioning the youth, which is a very important...
In the Year of the Youth, 2022.
In the Year of the Youth. One experiment on which the youth was, by design, overrepresented, and that came to an end recently, is the Conference on the Future of Europe, of course, which ended about a month ago. And I would say it's the most interesting, maybe, democratic experiment in the last few years, an interesting democratic innovation through which people could engage directly in deliberative bodies and give suggestions about the future of Europe. So I guess my question to you is, you are the president of the only directly elected European institution. How do you assess this experience? What are the lessons that you draw from it? What is the prospect of stabilizing the structures within the EU?
So I would go back 20 years to when I first started attending EPP Congresses, but also in being very active in the convention at the time. And I would take issue with the word overrepresented. First of all, we need to stop thinking about youth as being different to us or saying that their time will come. This European Parliament, at the moment, 60% of its members are new, and the average age has already dramatically decreased from when I joined 9 years ago. I look forward to that age continuing to decrease with a very pro-environment, pro-European, constructive, centrist, liberal and Christian Democrat agenda. And I say that because when I look across these 20 years and the arguments that were brought and the questions that were put and the criticisms that were made, shows that we have not done enough and shows that we have thought in too much of a silo mentality. We now today talk about the environment. We disentangle it from the economy. We talk about health as though it does not affect other sectors of our policy areas. We need to talk about migration. We were asked to talk about minorities. We were asked to talk about different cultures, different languages. I thought that was an amazing experience. The European Parliament was, let's say, one of its main proponents of this exercise. It continues to be, which is why we have now called for a convention to be launched. And I very much look forward to engaging in this time where citizens are asking us to do more, where they want more Europe. Remember 5 years ago, we were discussing Brexit, we were discussing about the possibility of other countries leaving the European Union. Today, we are, I would say, in a luxurious, opportunistic moment of finding member countries that want to come to the European Union because they think that this is our home. So let's use that and not look away at the young people in all those countries and give them the opportunity that I was given when my generation was fighting in a very tough political campaign for me, my country, and 9 others on the same day, on the 1st of May 2004, to join the European Union.
Yeah. I should also mention, when we talk about youth, that you are the youngest ever president.
Well, I'm not
of the
so
European
young anymore, but relatively speaking, yes, okay, I'm the youngest.
Well, I would like to ask you, let's talk a little bit about the European Parliament and the future of the European Parliament.
Sure.
We had a lot of democratic innovations in the last decade or so. We tried the Spitzenkandidaten process, to which the EPP remains committed, of course. We had the Conference on the Future of Europe. We have now a preliminary agreement on transnational lists. But the European Parliament is a parliament that still does not enjoy some of the traditional powers that democratic assemblies have enjoyed. Right of legislative initiative, for example, right to raise taxes. So how do you see the future of the European Parliament as an institution in the ecosystem of European democracy?
Well, on raising taxes, that's a competence issue, and we would also dispute the competences of other institutions to do that in a singular fashion. But on the right to legislative initiative and inquiry and scrutiny, this has been at the very top of the Parliament's prerogatives. It was also promised at the beginning of the mandate. We have a very long memory as a Parliament, and we will ensure that particularly next week we will be in Strasbourg, and there is a specific discussion in the plenary in the context of electoral and legislative reform that this is a promise that is kept. It is never easy, of course. I joined the Parliament from the Council, so I jumped from one institution to another, where you need to look at the different angles, which is great in a negotiation. We do it as legislators. We come from different angles and we find a compromise in the middle. I am optimistic when I attend the European Council, I see the prime ministers that are around the table. I see the discussion and the openness and honesty that there is around the table, and I am confident that the next few years will not be lost in the idea of getting the opportunities that can arise, unfortunately, from crises that we have just talked about, but also a future impending food crisis that will require immediate and effective responses. But I think that this is when Europe and the European People's Party and think tanks and organizations like the Martens Center can come in and say, this is the moment where we can lead. You are doing this, we are doing this in this context, but we need to not only do it between Congresses and another. We have 2 golden years ahead of us that we cannot lose sight of or even miss 1 minute from.
Actually, thank you very much, and perhaps this leads me to my last question, which is about the EPP and more generally European political parties and European political foundations. We are speaking, of course, from the Congress of the EPP, European parties as the lifeblood of democracy at the national level. We know, because we work with them, how important European political parties are also at the European level. How can we strengthen them? How do you see the future of European political parties going forward?
So I'm an elections geek, right? My doctorate was in electoral law. I love elections. I look at them, I study them, and I am very much fascinated by different processes in different countries, which reflect also historical and political contexts there. I think rather than talk about political parties, we need to talk about political participation. You see that our citizens are desperate for something to believe in. For some time, they looked away from political parties. They looked at movements, they looked at individuals, they looked at extremists, they looked at cynics, skeptics. I think when it comes to addressing the most difficult challenges that we will address over the next few months and years, they will look at who can deliver on their biggest concerns. And if it is political parties that can address them in a constructive, pragmatic, but also visionary way, then I think the result will automatically mean that the attractiveness will come back. It is not for granted. We cannot take it for granted. You need excitement, you need vision, you need a sense of we can win. But once you get there, I don't think people will talk about parties or other. They will say, I want to vote for that vision. And then we will not even have to discuss this question anymore.
Thank you very much. I think we have to wrap it up. I would like to really warmly thank you for your contribution, for your inspiring vision today. And of course, you know you can always count on the Martens Center to support you in this work of strengthening European democracy. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you very much, President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola. Thank you, Federico. Thank you to all of our audience here on spot and online. Don't forget to use the hashtag #UnitedForEurope when leaving your comments and impression on our social media channels. See you in 30 minutes. dear audience, and hello to our online viewers. We have arrived to our very last panel of the Martens Center Sideline events, live here from Rotterdam Ahoy Arena, where we are celebrating the 27th EPP Congress. For our next panel, we have prepared a title, European Ambitions and Geopolitical Realities, which will be moderated by the Martens Center Executive Director, Tomi Huhtanen. Tomi, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Sandra, and hello all online viewers. Indeed, this is the grande finale. We have finally come to almost end of the day and the final session, and we go out with the big bang, having the view on our planet and Europe's role in it. Our panel is titled European Ambitions and Geopolitical Realities. And I have two great panelists, two senior members of European Parliament who have been active in political life, 25 and plus years. So going through the CV would take a lot of time. Now I just mentioned, a little bit redundant, so I will mention Mr. David McAllister, who is, as mentioned, senior MEP. I would say, of your CV, maybe one of the biggest issue. President of Minister President of Lower Saxony, and then they can role here in the European Parliament, having very important role. And on my left, I have Frances Fitzgerald from Ireland, also long time active in the EPP family in Irish politics, having been deputy Prime Minister. So thank you very much for coming. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Let's go to the issue. So European ambitions and geopolitical realities. So let's take it. When Commission started, they defined themselves as a geopolitical commission. So that term geopolitical, first of all, I want to ask you, is it useful? Because European Union is about non-border issues, human rights, multilateralism, etc., etc. And now geopolitics, it puts in a very clear geographic context. So how do you understand the whole concept? Is it useful, Mr. McAllister?
I very much welcomed when Ursula von der Leyen in 2019 announced that this new commission would be a geopolitical commission, that she wants to make the European Union a geopolitical force. Why? Because the European Union, with the single market at its core, is the world's second strongest economy. So we have real economic power. And we have shown in trade policy how effective we can be because we have united and we have eye level with all other forces, nations, blocs in the world. Yes. But on foreign policy, we are still operating way below a level we should be operating, and that's why I strongly believe that we need a more effective, a more active, a more credible European foreign policy. We need to get our act together, and that's the way forward. And this, of course, will take some time. It definitely takes political determination. The Commission is showing this. The European Parliament has for many, many years been calling to unite our forces on foreign policy, and that's the way forward. The last point, we as the European Union are the world's largest provider of economic assistance and development aid, many others. We are a global payer, and now we need to become a global player.
Very good. Madam Fitzgerald, how do you see the whole concept?
I think
and
it's
new approach?
Yes, I think it's really important. I actually, at a personal level, find it very helpful, and at a macro political level, I think to speak of geopolitics, we have no choice now. War has come to our continent, but I think from a democratic point of view, it's really important because we know we have strength in solidarity. We're a very important union. David has mentioned a number of the ways that we are, humanitarian aid, trade, huge political clout, potentially, which I think we can build on even more. And I believe the concept of leadership is really critical to geopolitics. And I think we have to see ourselves, and must see ourselves, as a serious political player in the world. We are defending democracy. We lead in so many areas. We're going to lead in climate change. We are leading in it. We lead in equality. So many different areas. defending democracy, just remember, only 17% of the world's population live in fully developed democracies. So I think to go with our values of freedom of the press, human dignity, protecting the individual, and so on, I think geopolitically, to be out front with those values, we see them threatened by Russia, by China, and I think we can have very good global partners in the US and elsewhere, and so I think it's a very useful concept.
Madam, you just mentioned a very important point, the war, of course. Mr. McAllister made a reference to economics, but indeed, in the couple last months, situation has dramatically changed, which is, of course, the war. So how is now our new situation, geopolitical situation of Europe?
Of course it is, because war has come to our continent in a way that Putin was underestimated. The dependency, the energy dependence, and the dangers of that was underestimated. Our values are now completely threatened. I believe the war against Ukraine is effectively a war against Europe. So I really welcome the leadership that we've shown. And I think we have to continue to do that. It also has brought us together. Even though the 6th round of sanctions was somewhat delayed, there has been good unity. There has been military, humanitarian aid. And if you look at our citizens right across Europe, to see the way they have received Ukrainian refugees is outstanding. And that continues to this day. And we changed the directive on refugees to allow, citizens' rights, the Ukrainians the right to work and be involved in our country. So it's a very changed situation, very frightening, very sad. But we have responded, and we need to do even more, as Leo Varadkar has just said at the main plenary session here.
Thank you. And Mr. McAllister, how would you see that, the war? What has it done? There's a big discussion, many changes in Germany. How do you see that in European context?
Well, this war against Ukraine has changed everything in Europe. It was a wake-up call for us. This is not only the Russian Federation fighting a war of aggression against Ukraine. This is an attack on all our European values, on the European peace and security architecture. And this, of course, will put even more pressure on us in Europe to strengthen our own capability to act as a foreign policy player. One point I would like to underline is that we need to do more for our own security and defense in Europe. I welcome that many European countries are finally committed to the 2% NATO spending target. We are seeing Denmark now joining, probably after the referendum, the European security and defense policy. Our partners Sweden and Finland want to join NATO. So there are many, many things are happening because people notice that obviously things have changed. We are under a serious threat and we need to do more for our own security and defense. A last point, no surprise if you invite a German Christian Democrat, I would always argue whatever we do on European security and defense, it's about strengthening the European pillar within the framework of NATO, and that EU security and defense related issues should not be something in competition with NATO or in parallel with NATO or against NATO. It's about closely coordinating our European activities with the activities of NATO. And of course, we need to take on board the issues of those countries in the European Union who are not members of NATO, including Ireland.
Thank you. Now, you both mentioned the transatlantic relations, and let's be frank. We had the concept of trade agreement with the United States for many years. We were working for it. We were fighting for it. It didn't go so well. And after the Trump administration, in fact, we went to the era, you could say, of conflict, which didn't seem to get better even with the Biden administration. But now there seems to be new opportunity. Or is there? How do you see that this war has changed the relations with and the possibilities with the United States? Maybe
Ireland is geographically even closer to
yes,
the United States.
Close. Well, I've just come from the EU-US parliamentary dialogue, which was held last weekend, 2 days with 10 congressmen. and women from the States and 10 representatives in the European Parliament. And, you know, let's be honest, we breathed a sigh of relief when we had to change with President Trump. I mean, really a big sigh of relief because he was effectively anti the EU. So I think with President Biden, it is a new situation. Clearly, you have a more positive engagement with the EU. I think there is potential, for example, on energy. I think the united response to Ukraine has been very important. So I think it's about building the relationship now. But I would say it's a changed relationship. I mean, Europe is not going, you know, in any way inferior. We have to go very strongly as equal partners. And in this new geopolitical context that David and I have been talking about, with a strengthened hand with the solidarity that we're seeing across Europe on Ukraine. So I think there's a lot of potential there, diplomatically, economically, in fact, in every way. I mean, there will be challenges, there will be rivalries about different issues, but I think overall it's a positive story compared to the way it was.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. McAllister, how do you see, how do we get this, to keep this positive trend, what we are seeing in transatlantic relations? How to?
I can fully underline what Francis just said, nothing much to add. The Trump years were a difficult time for transatlantic relations. With the new president in the White House, things have changed, things have improved. On trade, we are working closer together. I would like to mention the Trade and Technology Council, which can be an important platform. I very much regret that it was not possible to conclude a trade agreement with the Americans under the Obama administration. Perhaps in the long term, we could still work on something which would be at least would go into the direction of what we used to call TTIP.
You think it's possible?
Well, not TTIP.
Yes.
I think that's done, but something perhaps different. But I still believe that it should be possible that the European Union can negotiate a trade and cooperation agreement with our most important ally and closest partner outside Europe, the United States. And since President Biden is in office, we now have, again, a rock-solid commitment of the Americans to NATO. And as Francis just mentioned, the unity we have seen between the United States and the European Union, but also other Western allies and partners in dealing with the war against Ukraine has been remarkable. We've seen some really good and very close and detailed cooperation. That's the way forward. I believe, for instance, that we also need to coordinate more closer our policy towards China.
Exactly.
That's another field. We won't always be of 100% the same opinion as the Americans. We have different views, we have different interests, but we have to get the basics right, and that's why I strongly hope that we can continue this better and improved transatlantic cooperation. A last point. We need to, as Europeans, identify the next generations of US lawmakers. We have to find out who are the next generation of women and men who will be taking up responsibility on the side of the Democrats, but also the Republicans. We need to engage, we need to talk to them, and we need to explain how we work in Europe and why a strong and active European Union is also a huge advantage for the United States.
Thank you. Now, Mr. McAllister mentioned China. So, do you agree? Could the policy with China be the uniting factor with Europeans in the United States? Do we need a common strategy? Number one, and number two, what China's reaction of war has changed some things. Also, how China is positioned. So, how? Because you work on the China relations.
Yes.
So, how do you see? That China aspect?
China's ambivalence about Ukraine and its really unclear position has added to a number of concerns that we have in relation to China. I believe the European, shall we call it, attitude, engagement with China is at a very significant and difficult point. In the Parliament, for example, you'll see again and again the conversations about human rights in China as we find out more and more about the state of human rights and the vulnerabilities, particularly of minority groups in China. We're very concerned about that. I think from an economic and trade point of view, the whole question of state subsidies in China and how you have a level playing field for our companies. We have huge trade with China, but trying to ensure a level playing field and that our companies are really operating in an equal way with Chinese companies, I think that's going to become more and more of an issue in the years ahead.
Yeah.
So I think there are tensions, and obviously between the United States and China as well. You would imagine, yes, that US would be more of an ally for us with China, and of course they will. But I also think they'll have some different interests and some different positioning. There are a series of challenges for us to figure out, as I've said, both on the political, diplomatic, human rights front and the economic front. And it's unclear, and particularly with the policy on COVID, for example, because trade has been totally disrupted. I know from talking to colleagues in Ireland that the relationships, the business relationships, are utterly disrupted at the moment. So we have to see that recovery from COVID first. And then there's a series of issues. Unclear how China will react, but I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going through a more difficult, challenging phase, and I think the outcome is less certain. And also you have to watch what's happening in Taiwan.
Yeah, indeed. Mr. McAllister, do you agree? I remember you, I think it was one of our discussions some half year ago, you kind of outlined our strategy, so we cooperate when we can, we compete when we need to, and we contest when we have to. But now it seems that, as Madam mentioned, it's becoming more and more conflictive. So what should be the change, in your view, in our approach to China?
I still believe that the free English seas are the way forward in dealing with China. Cooperate where possible, compete where needed, and confront where necessary. Let's remember, China is a cooperation partner, for instance, on climate change. We will not be able to tackle our global targets, these global challenges, without also getting the Chinese on board. China is an important economic competitor for us. We shouldn't underestimate how important China is for the European economy, but on the other hand, our market in Europe is very important for the Chinese side. And I think here we could do more. We want free and fair competition. We want a level playing field, and this level playing field doesn't exist. And we have to be tougher on China, that we expect that the same rules and conditions apply to Chinese companies in Europe as they are applied for European companies in China. But we need to also confront China. The communist leadership in Beijing has very different views than we do on the rule of law, on human rights, on democracy, on media freedom. China is a systemic political rival, a competitor. And what we are seeing, and this is worrying us all, an increasingly assertive China on the foreign policy stage. And we have to be very clear that we support our Western allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific who are in favor of a rules-based cooperation for multilateral structures. And we strongly believe also at an international level that we are in favor of the strength of the rule of law. And that is something different than to have the rule that the stronger decides what the others have to do. So we need to step up our engagement in the Indo-Pacific. I welcome that the European Union has now presented for the first time its own Indo-Pacific strategy. We have to now implement all the announcements we have made. And a final point, in dealing with China, we need to be very principled. We have values, and these values are important, and we need to defend our values. So let's be pragmatic in dealing with China, but we have to be, on the other hand, very, very principled. And that's why also I thought the last message that Ursula von der Leyen presented the Chinese leadership was, we will be very carefully observing how you are dealing with the Russian Federation. And if there's any kind of Russian support for the Russian Federation in this barbaric war against Ukraine, this will have immediate economic consequences. And that is the message Beijing understands. Our economic power is what impresses the Chinese.
Thank you. We are almost getting to the end of our discussion, but I want to take one question still. and mentioned the United Kingdom. And in Europe's geopolitical context, it may sound strange, but you both have been working on this issue for years and years. And as number one, and number two, in war in Ukraine, we see new kind of bond being created. And when UK was very much involved, is very much involved in supporting Ukraine. Also, you mentioned. Finland's and Sweden's NATO membership application, UK were there to giving guarantees. So, my question is that does the war in Ukraine and UK's approach to the whole situation give a new opportunity for European Union to heal some wounds, create new kind of relations with the United Kingdom, and how that will impact Europe's or EU's geopolitical standing?
Well, from an Irish point of view, we certainly have unfinished business with the UK, and the EU has unfinished business with the UK. And it's very challenging at the moment in relation to the protocol. I mean, Brexit is the problem, not the protocol. The protocol is working, but we have various threats, effectively, from the UK government to unilaterally change an international treaty. So that remains an ongoing huge issue, despite the flexibility of the EU. Yeah. Now, but having said that, for example, from an Irish perspective, the UK is our nearest neighbour. We want to have a good relationship with them. It needs work at present, I have to say, and that's putting it mildly. But that is the situation, and also from an EU point of view. Of course, the UK has responded very well in terms of supporting Ukraine. I think we all appreciate that, and every country is aware of that. How much it gives a new opportunity to rebuild in the short term, I am not so sure. I think it's a longer-term project to rebuild relationships with the UK, because they have been effectively, totally broken in many ways, in many arenas. But in the medium term, I would say that yes, obviously we want to see a better EU-UK relationship where there, is cooperation and opportunities for both sides. But let's sort out Brexit and then continue with the work. And David has been doing huge work, actually, on Brexit for us over a long period.
Well, I think Francis just described the situation in an excellent way. The United Kingdom will never be a simple third country for us. Yeah. We all regret Brexit, but we have to face the situation. The United Kingdom is an important partner of us in G7, G20, a NATO ally, and a close neighbour and a cooperation partner. And we have seen on Ukraine how, on the one hand, we have an excellent cooperation with the UK. We've had excellent cooperation between London and the EU27. And on the other hand, it's sad to see that when it comes to the implementation of the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland, the UK is simply not delivering. And the protocol was a substantial part of a withdrawal agreement. It was painstakingly negotiated over months. It carries the signature of the UK Prime Minister. It was ratified by the UK Parliament. And what we expect is the British side to implement what was agreed, to deliver on the promises that were made. And that is what I really find difficult to understand. I've been to Northern Ireland twice last year, and what I noticed is that most people are not questioning the protocol. They want the protocol to work. And the protocol is not the problem. The protocol is part of solving a problem. The problem is called Brexit. And the protocol does not have additional obstacles for Northern Ireland. I think that it also offers a lot of opportunities, because for Northern Irish businesses, they can get the best of two worlds. On the one hand, they are an integral part of the UK single market, and on the other hand, for goods, they have access to the world's largest single market, the EU single market. So we should talk more about the opportunities the protocol is offering, but sometimes I have the impression that it's mainly politicians who are trying to cause all this fuss around the protocol. It's not so much businesses and citizens.
Excellent. We still have 1 minute left. So, for the both panelists, in one phrase, I would ask, how do you see Europe's geopolitical role in 10 years? One phrase. So pause, and first, Mr. McAllister. So Europe's geopolitical role in 10 years' time. One phrase, how do you see it?
Hopefully we will then be more of a geopolitical player than now, and one of the bases will be to create a fully fledged European security and defense union.
Excellent. Madam.
I would say stronger geopolitical role, showing leadership in the world, defending our democracy, and with more solidarity amongst all of the member states, which will also, by the way, be very good for trade and for the economy.
Thank you very much. I think it's a great conclusion. Thank you very much, online viewers. And Sandra, I'll leave you to conclude.
Thank you, MEP McAllister. Thank you, MEP Fitzgerald. Thank you to our audience here in Spot and all of you online. With this, we have come to an end of our two-day Martens Center sideline event here at the EPP Congress. If you want to re-watch one of our debates, make sure to check our YouTube and Martens Center website. Continue following the Martens Center activities to stay informed, and we are looking forward to seeing you at one of our future events. Have a nice day and goodbye.